пришли. И я думаю, что сегодня мы будем обсуждать достаточно интересную тему и несколько организационных вопросов, которые мы будем решать. Let me introduce our guests, and so I will change language sometimes. And let me introduce you Hilary Pилкингтон, professor of Warwick University, and Ronald Inglhart, professor of Michigan University, and the
Higher School of Economics.
Yes, scientific advisor of Laboratory for Comparative Social Studies. And today the topic of our seminar would be international projects between local and global, and I think we can distribute the questions we are going to discuss today. Of course, it's not obligatory questions, but maybe these points can be interesting for discussion. So I think we can look at. It's in Russian. No, it's I think around 10. I think. Generally, our main idea here will be to think about the possibilities, the threats, and the advantages of international projects. And in this context, it will be a really great pleasure to hear the ideas about international project people who participate in international project, for instance, Professor Inglhart and Professor Pilkington. So I think we start our seminar by your comments about this topic, and afterwards maybe everyone can participate in the discussion. So, Professor.
Thank you very much. I brought a security blanket. I wasn't sure exactly what would face me here, so just in case, I brought a PowerPoint presentation, fascinating material about evolutionary modernization and cultural change, but we won't talk about it. I think it seems much more appropriate to talk about international projects between local and global, and if we run out of things to say, I could do my PowerPoint presentation, but we probably won't need to. I think my first comment on international projects would be they're tremendous fun. I wouldn't be here in St. Petersburg without them. I came to St. Petersburg. Originally, I came here to get a partner for the World Values Survey. I was interested in, this is a survey that is carried out around the world studying how what people want out of life is changing. Okay. This is a really interesting project that I've been working on for literally most of my life. We've been doing this since I was a young chap, and we have been studying motivations and beliefs in people around the world. We've now studied this in 97 countries, and we've got multiple waves since 1981, when your parents maybe met and began dating, who knows, but certainly before any of you, other than the other one or two mature gentlemen in the room, were born. This is a project that I think is worth doing because what people want out of life is changing. I think we can demonstrate with survey data from countries containing 90% of the world's population that people's motivations and beliefs are changing. They're changing gradually. It's invisible. I came to Russia in May of last year, 2010, seeking a strong Russian partner. The World Values Survey has carried out representative national surveys in 97 countries, including Russia, and we have data from Russia going back to 1982. So we've got the ability to follow things like how happy the Russian people are. I'm happy to say that though it went down, down, down terribly, and the Russian people reached a level of malaise, unhappiness, dissatisfaction in 1999 that was extremely low. Now it's coming back up. We're doing a survey in Russia right now. Fieldwork's going on. Possibly interviews are being carried out right now. And I think that this will show that Russia has recovered from this tremendous malaise. Probably, my guess is it'll be back about to where you'd expect it to be in the basis of its economic level. One of the things that we've learned is rich countries are happier than poor countries. That might not surprise you. Having enough to eat is better, and people like it better than starving. This is not exactly an amazing finding, but actually it was not self-evident, and some scholars contested it. The sort of myths of the noble savage is just as happy in their naked, starving, or let's say subsistence level state as the rich people in societies like Russia or the United States. Actually, it's not true. They tend to be a lot less happy. We've got data from low-income societies, and they tend to be much less happy than the people from high-income societies. That's not exactly stunning, but it is ideologically controversial. They're happier, and Russia was a really interesting exception. In our 1982 survey in Russia, we found already the Russian level of happiness was lower than we'd expect for a country as rich as it is. It was about the level of Pakistan, which is not nearly as rich. In subsequent studies in 1990, 1995, 1999, subjective well-being in Russia went way down. We're monitoring this, and it has come back. In 2005 and 2008, subjective well-being in Russia was coming back, nearing the level where we'd expect it to be, simply on the basis of an economic prediction. If it was as rich as other countries with its economic level, if happy as other countries at its level of economic development, we'd expect it to be here, and it was here. And I think it's coming back to, maybe it'll hit that point in this survey. This is an example of, you find interesting things and fun things in cross-national studies. We find, for example, that the Russian people, that first of all, happiness is linked with economic development. So there's something that, there's this great debate between the noble savage school and progress school, and it turns out that on this point, the interpretation that economic development is linked with greater happiness gets a lot of support. And you wouldn't be able to know this unless you did cross-national studies. We have longitudinal studies of happiness in the US, and it's extremely flat. The American people over the last 50 years have not gotten any happier, and many social scientists interpreted this to mean that happiness is largely genetic, it's determined by factors that never change. Congratulations to the Russian people. You have gone through a traumatic experience that proves that it is possible to make people less happy. Russia became lots less happy after the collapse of communism, the breakup of the Soviet Union, the collapse of the welfare system, the breakdown of order, crime, poverty, falling life expectancy, did bring dramatically lower happiness. The American data alone would not show this. We have this flat line where, perversely, we didn't get any happier since 1945, but 1945 was kind of a glorious time to start the time series. We had just won World War II with a lot of help from our friends in Russia, and kind of we're at a high point where we were the world's #1 country, richest, 43% of the world's GNP, rich, happy, victorious, righteous, having defeated fascism, with Russia bearing an even greater load than the US. So anyway, one point is, cross-national research enables you to learn things you wouldn't know otherwise. Cross-national research with data from many countries enables you to learn quite a lot. The World Value Survey has data representing 90% of the world's population, and we are finding out absolutely fascinating things. What makes people happy varies, for example. What's important in shaping happiness in low-income countries is not the same as what shapes happiness in high-income countries. You wouldn't find this out unless you had data from rich and poor countries. And this is very interesting. We have learned what makes their cultural systems, beliefs, trust, tolerance, things like this, are very strongly linked with how democratic a society is. This is something you wouldn't be able to find out unless you had data from many countries. In order to find this out, you have to have data from non-democratic countries and democratic countries, and as many as possible. And if you get data from 97 countries, representing the whole spectrum from China to Sweden or Switzerland or whatever you consider the most democratic country, you find that the beliefs linked with democracy vary a lot, and we get an idea of what human beliefs are linked with democracy, what maybe you could do to encourage this kind of belief and encourage democracy, and even some sense of how things are moving along over time. For example, one of the predictions that I make with my colleagues in the World Value Survey is China actually is moving toward democracy. This is something that is not self-evident because the Chinese leadership is firmly in control. They control the army and the secret police, and they can repress democracy by means of this. But underneath this, we find gradual changes in the mass public that are relatively conducive to democracy. Evidence from other countries indicates that these certain attitudes are emerging in China that I can't predict the future, obviously. I can't give you perfect predictions, but let's say statistically, these beliefs tend to go with democratization, so that I would say there's gradually growing pressure for democracy in China. The beliefs of the younger Chinese are significantly more pro-democratic than beliefs of older Chinese, and I would predict not next week, sorry about that. It will not be next year. It'll be 20 years from now or so. I would expect rising pressure for democracy in China. This is a kind of data, of prediction you could only make on the basis of cross-national research. It's, you have to have variation in the country. You have to have data from countries that are totally non-democratic, more democratic, highly democratic, in order to analyze what beliefs are linked with democracy. So I am a strong advocate of having cross-national data. It's fun. It enables you to travel and meet interesting people. You get to have genuine borscht and some of these side benefits. And you also can learn a lot that you would not otherwise know with data from just one country. I've talked long enough. Maybe it's turn.
Thank you very much, Hillary.
No, I'm just part of the continuing discussion. I've got no presentation particularly.
Okay.
Unless you want me to talk about the FP7 project or something.
Yeah, well, if you want.
I mean, perhaps I could just say a few words about the project we're currently engaged in with our Russian partners based here at, or some of whom are based here at the Sociology Department of the High School of Economics in St. Petersburg. And we've actually been working with Professor Almerchenko for many, many years, and don't think how many international projects we've done. A lot of them kind of based in Russia actually, but then about 3 or 4 kind of big international ones. And I realise I'm a native speaker and I'm speaking far too quickly, aren't I? I'll slow down. The current one we're involved in is called My Place as an acronym. It's funded by the European Commission through the FP7 programme, and it's under the Social Sciences and Humanities Corps and under their theme In the Shadows of Totalitarianism and Fascism. And it's a project about civic engagement of young people, but looking at that civic engagement, so all kinds of civic and political engagement. So one of our key concepts is kind of rethinking the political, what constitutes the political. But it's looking at that civic engagement, not as many other projects actually recently have done in the European Union, simply as a kind of way of measuring the degree of engagement, the changing forms of engagement of young people through social network media and so on and so forth, and flash mobs and all the new kinds of things we're seeing, but looking at it in the particular context of the past and the future. So we're looking at the ways in which political heritages in different countries have shaped current patterns of civic engagement, and also how those heritages and those practices of civic engagement, what they might tell us about potential future receptivity to populist and radical or extremist, again, problematic terminology, political parties which we see emerging and becoming stronger across the European space. And it's a very big international project, so there are 16 partners in 14 different countries. So one of the challenges we face is kind of just the size of this kind of project. It's not the World Value Survey, but it's still quite a big project. I think the other thing which perhaps doesn't affect the World Value Survey so much is that it's a mixed method project, so we're seeking to look towards developing a transnational mode of analysis, not only for survey data, but also for interview data, semi-structured interviews, and ethnographic case studies as well in all of these countries. So I think that's a particular challenge, and I would be quite keen to hear other people's experiences of trying to conduct, I mean, I won't call it comparative because it's not strictly comparative, but transnational analysis of qualitative as well as quantitative data.
Спасибо, thank you. Do we need to summarize somehow, or everyone can be involved in this discussion? Ну, то есть сейчас мы переходим к дискуссии, да, и те вопросы, которые поставили мы перед этим семинаром, они достаточно разные, начиная с такого достаточно теоретического уровня, когда мы, в принципе, рассуждаем о том, чем сегодня является международный проект, является ли это проект по укреплению границ национальных наук, да, и когда партнеры, участвующие в исследовании, фактически занимаются тем, что они укрепляют в международных проектах, укрепляют свои собственные поля, свои собственные науки, границы. С другой стороны, это может быть вопрос о новом таком методологическом космополитизме, если использовать терминологию Бека. И когда мы говорим о том, что международный проект у нас сегодня превращается в такое новое методологическое пространство и новую перспективу на рассмотрение старых категорий. И если мы в национальных проектах говорим об обществе, это прежде всего национальное общество, да, в международных проектах говорим ли мы о глобальном обществе, либо это все равно сохранение национальных обществ, с которыми мы работаем. Это одна из перспектив, которую мы можем обсудить. С другой стороны, мы можем поговорить, собственно, о тех вызовах и тех трудностях и тех проблемах, с которыми сталкиваемся в процессе международных проектов, начиная от организации международного проекта и коммуникации между партнерами с одной стороны, с другой стороны мы можем говорить о возможности сочетания различных методов и применения этих методов в разных национальных контекстах. Вот. То есть, ну, поле достаточно открыто, я всячески призываю включаться всех тех, кто уже участвовал в международных проектах, либо тех, кто думает в этом участвовать, либо собирается, либо в принципе готов оценить, насколько в сегодняшних условиях международный проект является значимым, да, насколько мы должны, не знаю, поддерживать саму идею международных проектов, либо мы, ну, может быть, обратная точка зрения, когда мы, в принципе, отказываемся от участия в международных проектах по каким-то причинам. Да. Вот.
So now we start the discussion, and we will discuss the questions that I have sent you in my letters, so you probably know.
Okay.
Очень быстро.
Просто какое-то время